I never thought I'd find myself in this position, but here I am, pouring my heart out about the most painful experience of my life. My name is Jake, and for the last 5 years I thought I had the perfect marriage with my wife, Emily. We were that couple everyone envied, with a beautiful house in the suburbs, 2 kids, and a seemingly unshakable bond. But like all great things, there was something lurking beneath the surface, something I was too blind to see until it was too late. The trouble started when I noticed Emily behaving differently. It began subtly. She'd come home later than usual, often with excuses that never quite added up. "I got caught up at work," she'd say, while I could feel the flicker of doubt begin to ignite in my mind. I tried to dismiss it, chalking it up to the stress of her job as a marketing manager at a big firm. But as time went on, the changes became harder to ignore. A new wardrobe, late-night phone calls, odd texts that she'd quickly close when I walked into the room. The air of secrecy draped over our interactions felt heavy, and I found myself questioning everything. It didn't hit me like a ton of bricks at first. No, it was more like a slow realization creeping into my subconscious. I started to do the math. What used to be our intimate moments dwindled to practically nothing. We would lie in bed each night, and I could feel the distance widening between us. The last straw came when I overheard a conversation between Emily and someone named Mark. I didn't catch the whole conversation, but the way she laughed and flirted made my stomach churn. Mark was one of my rivals at work, a guy who always seemed to get under my skin, but I never thought he would cross that line. It was a Friday evening when I stumbled upon the evidence. I had planned a surprise dinner for Emily, thinking it might rekindle the spark we once had. She was late, which wasn't unusual, but I decided to check her phone, something I never thought I would do. There in plain sight were texts between Emily and Mark that made my blood run cold. They were flirty, suggestive, and casually confirmed my worst fears. She was cheating on me. I felt like the ground had fallen out from under me, leaving me suspended in a pit of despair. When she finally came home, I confronted her. "Emily, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and hurt. I laid out the evidence like a cold, hard fact. "Are you sleeping with Mark?" The look on her face was a mixture of shock and guilt. I couldn't tell. "Jake, how could you even think that? You're being paranoid," she shot back, the defensiveness lacing her words. It was infuriating. I could feel my rage boiling over as she attempted to deflect and deny. She spewed a barrage of lies, claiming it was all harmless flirting, that I was imagining things. But I knew the truth, and deep down I could see the cracks in her facade. The emotional impact was overwhelming. I felt betrayed, crushed, like my entire world had shattered in an instant. I walked away from that confrontation feeling hollow, like a ghost of the person I once was. My heart was heavy with sorrow and anger, but also, strangely enough, a flicker of determination began to take root within me. How could she do this? After everything we had built together, I felt like I was gasping for air in a sea of betrayal, but I refused to let it drown me. Instead, I started to plot a response, not just for revenge, but for my own recovery. I was determined to reclaim my life, my dignity, and yes, even my success in the business world. I wouldn't allow this betrayal to define me or destroy everything I had worked for. As I sat there in silence, I realized I had a choice to make. I could wallow in pity, or I could take control of my destiny. I chose the latter. Little did Emily know that I was just getting started. After that fateful confrontation, I felt a storm brewing inside me. The pain of betrayal was palpable, but it wasn't just about my marriage. It was also a personal affront to everything I had worked for. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was determined to turn this situation to my advantage. I needed a plan, something that would not only help me reclaim my life, but also show Emily and Mark that their betrayal wouldn't go unpunished. I started by diving deep into my work. As a project manager for a growing tech firm, I had always taken pride in my career, but now this was more than just a job, it was my battlefield. I threw myself into my projects, working late nights and weekends, focusing on bringing in new clients and securing deals. I knew that the best way to hurt Emily and Mark was to succeed where they thought I couldn't. While I was busy building my empire, I kept my distance from Emily. She tried everything to get back into my good graces, offering explanations that felt more like excuses. "I'm sorry, Jake. It didn't mean anything. I love you," she would plead, but I barely listened. I was too focused on my plan. I could see she was panicking. The late nights were wearing on her, and I could sense desperation creeping into her attempts to reconnect. But it was clear that she hadn't changed. One night, while working late, I received a text from a mutual friend, urging me to check out a local bar where Emily was supposedly meeting Mark again. My heart raced at the thought of her betraying me once more, but this time I would take action. I decided to go to the bar, a bold move, but one I felt was necessary. When I arrived, I was hit by mixed emotions. There she was, laughing and drinking with Mark, completely at ease as if I didn't exist. Seeing them together ignited a fire inside me. I felt betrayed, but also empowered. I was no longer the passive husband who would let her walk all over him. I was determined to show them both that they had underestimated me. As I watched from a distance, I began to formulate my next steps. I pulled out my phone and recorded a few clips of their interaction. I had no idea when or how I'd use this footage, but I knew it would come in handy. I had a gut feeling that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about ensuring I would rise from this situation far stronger than I had ever been. The following week, I was relentless at work. I secured a major partnership with a tech startup that would elevate my company's position in the market. It was a significant win, and I could feel my confidence returning. With each new accomplishment, I began to feel lighter, as if I was shedding the weight of Emily's betrayal. This was my time to shine, but I wasn't done yet with my plan for revenge. I was also gathering intel about Mark and his career. It didn't take long to discover that he had been playing dirty in the business world. His reputation was anything but clean, and I had access to key players in the industry who would appreciate knowing the truth. I started building a case against him, collecting evidence of his unethical dealings, and I began to strategize how I would expose him to his higher-ups. I spent evenings gathering information while meticulously planning my next moves. I knew I had to be careful. I didn't want it to blow back on me. My goal was to create a web that would entangle both Emily and Mark the moment they thought they had everything figured out. Every day at work, I felt my resolve strengthen. I was no longer just Jake, the husband who had been cheated on. I was Jake, the man on a mission to reclaim his life and his successes. I smiled as I thought about how I would eventually confront Emily with everything I had learned. She would see just how underestimated I had been. The emotional roller coaster was dizzying. I had gone from heartbroken and angry to emboldened and focused. I was ready to rise from the ashes like a phoenix, and I would make sure both Emily and Mark understood the price of their betrayal. It was a game now, and I was playing to win. The days passed, and with each passing moment, I felt myself becoming more and more resolute in my plan. The act of building my professional life back up while simultaneously digging into Emily and Mark's lives felt oddly empowering. I was gaining momentum, and I was determined to keep it going. Emily was trying her best to salvage our relationship, but it was like watching someone stumble through a minefield without realizing where the dangers lay. She would make small gestures, cooking dinner, trying to engage in conversation, but it felt hollow. I could hardly look at her without feeling a wave of resentment wash over me. The betrayal was still fresh, and no amount of sweet talk or affection could erase the images of her with Mark. I felt like a spectator in my own life, watching a performance that lacked authenticity. One evening, after a particularly long day at work where I had just finalized a major contract, Emily approached me as I was going through my emails. "We need to talk, Jake," she said, her expression serious. I turned to face her, heart racing at the prospect of another attempt at reconciliation. "What now?" I replied, a hint of sarcasm slipping out. "I know I've messed up, but I want to fix this. I love you and I want my family back," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I paused, weighing my response. "How can I trust you when you've been lying to me? You think I don't know you're still seeing Mark?" She looked taken aback, her eyes darting as if searching for a way to navigate the conversation. "I'm not seeing him anymore, Jake. "It was a mistake and I swear it's over," she insisted. But I could see through her words. The desperation in her eyes told me that she was still trying to manage a double life, and I was no longer the clueless husband who would accept her lies. "Emily, let me show you what a real mistake looks like," I said, my voice low and steady, trying to keep my composure. I had to reveal my plan soon, but not just yet. For now, the best tactic was to keep her on her toes. I smiled, letting the tension hang in the air. "I've got some surprises up my sleeve." The next day at work, I decided it was time to put my vengeance into action. I had gathered enough evidence on Mark to make an impact. I scheduled a meeting with my company's executives under the pretense of discussing strategies for growth and partnerships. Little did they know, I had a second agenda. I intended to expose Mark's unethical practices, which I suspected would resonate well with my higher-ups, especially given the competitive nature of the industry. At the meeting, I presented my findings with a mix of professionalism and calculated confidence. I started with numbers and projections, seamlessly weaving in the details of Mark's shady dealings. The room fell silent as I laid out the evidence: emails, documents, and witness accounts that would paint a damning picture of his character. My colleagues exchanged glances, and I could sense the shift in atmosphere. I was no longer the underdog, I was the one holding the cards. When I finished, the executives were visibly impressed. "Jake, this is solid work," my boss Lisa said, a smirk playing on her lips. "We never liked the way Mark operated, but this is gold." The meeting ended with whispers of taking action against Mark, and I left the room feeling exhilarated. I had successfully pulled the rug out from under someone I once considered a rival. The thrill of that small victory fueled my determination to keep going. As the days went by, I kept my focus on my work, and my triumph over Mark became a distant echo of a bitter reality I had once known. Emily, on the other hand, was still oblivious to the storm that was brewing. She began to notice my newfound confidence and energy. "You seem different, Jake," she remarked one evening. "I like this version of you." I smirked internally, knowing she had no idea how much I had changed. "Yeah, I've just been focusing on what really matters," I said, maintaining a nonchalant facade. But my resolve was tested when Mark was summoned for a meeting with my bosses. The quiet satisfaction I had felt earlier turned into a surge of adrenaline. I knew that soon he would be facing the consequences of his actions, and part of me wanted to be there to witness it. The day of the meeting arrived, and I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I had to maintain my composure, but deep down, I was eager to see Mark squirm. I waited until the meeting was over before I made my presence known, wandering into the common area where my coworkers were gathered, gossiping about the fallout. "Did you hear about Mark?" someone said, their voice tinged with intrigue. "He's been put on probation. Apparently Jake had some serious dirt on him." My heart raced as I heard my name intertwined with Mark's downfall. This was it. The taste of sweet revenge was finally becoming real. There was no turning back now. I had played my cards right, and now Emily and Mark would see that I was not someone to be trifled with. I had risen from the ashes, and I would continue to do so, one strategic move at a time. The balance of power was shifting, and I was ready to take control of my life, business, and heart. But I knew this was just the beginning. As the weeks passed, the fallout from my actions began to reveal itself in ways I had not anticipated. Mark's reputation took a serious hit, and I could see the subtle changes in the workplace environment. My colleagues were buzzing with news, and suddenly I was the one they looked to for guidance and leadership. It felt surreal, but I embraced the shift. This was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my identity and positioning myself as someone to be respected and feared in the industry. Meanwhile, Emily was trying harder than ever to reconnect. I could sense her desperation through the gestures she made. She was cooking my favorite meals, attempting to rekindle our intimacy, and even reaching out to friends we hadn't seen in ages to arrange get-togethers. On the surface, it appeared as if she was genuinely remorseful, but I knew better. Her actions felt calculated, almost as if she was trying to smooth over the cracks in our relationship without addressing the underlying issues. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning my next steps at work, I returned home to find her setting up an elaborate dinner. The table was adorned with candles, and the smell of my favorite pasta wafted through the air. I had to hand it to her. She knew how to put on a show. But the sight of it made my stomach turn. The last thing I wanted was to be drawn back into her web of deceit. "Jake, sit down. I've been thinking about us and I really want to make this work," she said, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. For a moment I was tempted to feel a flicker of empathy, but I quickly reminded myself of the truth. "Emily," I began, trying to keep my tone even. "You want to make this work, but how do I know you mean it? You've lied to me for months. You've betrayed my trust in a way that's hard to come back from." "I know, I was stupid and I'm so sorry," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I'll do whatever it takes to prove it to you." "Prove it?" I scoffed, leaning back in my chair. "What does that even look like? You can't just flip a switch and expect everything to be fine." Her expression shifted and I could see the flicker of annoyance mixed with guilt. "So, what do you want me to do? Just give up? You're not even trying." I leaned forward, my gaze piercing into hers. "I'm trying to rebuild my life, Emily. I'm trying to reclaim my sense of worth, and you being here, pretending everything is fine, isn't helping. You need to realize that I'm not your puppet anymore." That conversation did not end well. Emily stormed out of the room, tears streaming down her face, and I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. I didn't want to hurt her, but I knew that I had to be firm. It was for both of our sakes. The next day at work, the news hit like wildfire. Mark had been officially let go. The executives had decided to part ways with him after reviewing the evidence I had presented. I felt a rush of victory, but also a sense of relief. This was a significant turning point, not just for me, but for my career. I was no longer just the guy who got cheated on. I was now someone who could take action and become a leader in my field. As I sat at my desk, basking in the aftermath of my success, I received a message from Mark. My heart raced as I read the words on the screen. "Jake, I know what you did. You think you've won, but you've only made things worse for yourself. Emily will never truly be yours again. You've pushed her away with your obsession for revenge." I felt a surge of anger, but more than that, I felt a sense of clarity. Mark was still trying to manipulate me from the sidelines, but he was wrong about one thing: I wasn't obsessed with revenge. I was focused on reclaiming my life and my dignity. I decided not to respond, knowing that engaging with him would be a waste of time. The following week, Emily confronted me again. This time she looked different, less defensive and more vulnerable. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she began, her voice steady. "I know I've messed up and I need to take responsibility for my actions. I want to go to counseling. I want to work on our marriage, but I understand if you can't see a future with me." Her honesty caught me off guard. For the first time, it felt like she was genuinely considering my feelings and the damage she had caused. But I was still torn. Part of me wanted to explore the possibility of reconciliation, while another part of me was hesitant. I had just come so far in reclaiming my life. "Emily," I said slowly, "I appreciate you wanting to make things right, but I need to let this unfold in my own time. I'm not ready to dive back into our relationship just yet. I need to focus on myself and my career first." The disappointment in her eyes was palpable, but she nodded, understanding my stance. "I get it. I'll be here when you're ready." As I walked away from that conversation, I felt an unexpected weight lift off my shoulders. I was finally taking control of my life, making decisions based on my needs, rather than out of fear of losing her. I knew that I deserved to prioritize my happiness and success, even if that meant facing the emotional fallout of our relationship head-on. I threw myself into my work even more, leveraging my newfound reputation to secure more clients and expand my network. Each small victory felt like a confirmation of my strength. I was no longer the man who had been cheated on. I was becoming a version of myself that I didn't even know existed, a man who could rise from the ashes and claim his space in the world. But deep down, I also knew that this chapter was far from over. I had made progress, but I was still grappling with the emotional turmoil of betrayal. I would need to navigate the complexities of my feelings about Emily while trying to keep my career on the fast track. What lay ahead would determine just how far I could go in reclaiming my life and what I truly wanted for my future. As I continued to focus on my career, opportunities began to pour in. My reputation as a go-getter who had taken down a rival only strengthened my standing in the industry. I was invited to speak at conferences and participate in panel discussions, sharing my insights on business strategies and leadership. Each time I stood in front of an audience, I felt a surge of confidence that washed away some of the hurt I had felt from Emily's betrayal. But as my professional life flourished, my personal life remained a complicated web of emotions. Emily was still around, albeit in a different capacity. She had accepted my terms, no pressure to reconcile immediately, but she was willing to go to therapy and work on herself. I had to admit, seeing her attempt to grow on her own terms struck a chord within me. It was a strange feeling, knowing that while I had moved forward in many ways, she was making strides to better herself as well. One evening, after a particularly successful day at work, I found myself at home, contemplating everything that had transpired. I had just signed a huge deal that could change the course of my career, and I felt invincible. I was in my living room, basking in that glow, when Emily walked in, holding a small gift box. "Jake, I wanted to give you this," she said, her voice steady. I raised an eyebrow, taken aback. "What is it?" "Just open it," she urged, placing it on the coffee table in front of me. I hesitated but ultimately gave in, carefully peeling back the wrapping paper. Inside, I discovered a watch, elegant, understated, and expensive. "It's beautiful," I admitted, feeling a mix of appreciation and confusion. "But you didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to show you how much I appreciate you," she continued, her eyes earnest. "You've worked so hard, and I want you to know that I see you. I'm proud of everything you've accomplished, especially how you've handled everything with Mark." I looked at her, searching her face for any signs of insincerity, but all I found was sincerity. "Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate it," I finally said, a part of me softening in that moment. But as the evening progressed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I was still grappling with the aftermath of her infidelity, and while I recognized her efforts to change, I couldn't ignore the nagging doubt about whether I could ever fully trust her again. The next few weeks continued to blur the lines between my personal and professional life. I was going to therapy too, determined to unpack the layers of pain, anger, and confusion that still lingered. My therapist encouraged me to explore what I truly wanted moving forward, both with my career and my relationship with Emily. "Jake, it seems like you're in a transformative phase," she said during one session, sitting across from me with a notepad in hand. "You're finding your power in your work, but what about your emotional well-being? How do you feel when you think about the possibility of reconciling with Emily?" There was a long pause as I considered her question. I think I'm still hurt, and part of me wants to protect myself from getting hurt again. But I also see someone who's trying to change, trying to become better. It's confusing. "Confusion is part of the process," she replied. "You're rediscovering your identity after a significant betrayal, and that takes time. You need to decide what's best for you, independent of Emily's actions or choices." That resonated deeply with me. I had spent months focusing on revenge, on proving myself in a professional capacity, but now it was time to turn inward. I needed to understand what I wanted without the noise of my past and my relationship with Emily clouding my judgment. One evening, I took a walk to clear my head. I strolled through our neighborhood, the cool night air wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. I passed by the park where Emily and I had shared countless moments, dates, laughter, and even arguments. Those memories flooded back, and I felt a bittersweet pang in my chest. As I walked, I stumbled upon a bench and sat down, allowing myself to reflect. I thought about the relationship we had built and the love I once felt. But then I also thought about the betrayal, the deep hurt that had shaken me to my core. It was a juxtaposition of emotions that left me feeling unsettled. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Hey, can we talk? I think we need to reassess where we're at." My heart raced at her message. This was it, the moment I had both anticipated and dreaded. I took a deep breath, realizing that I needed to articulate how I felt to be honest with her about the roller coaster of emotions I had been riding. I replied, "Sure, let's meet at the coffee shop tomorrow morning." The next day I arrived early, my nerves tingling as I waited for her. When she walked in, looking apprehensive yet determined, I knew this conversation had the potential to alter the course of our relationship. We ordered our coffees and found a quiet corner. I looked at her, searching for words. "Emily, I appreciate everything you've done to show me you want to change, but I need you to understand something." I began, my voice steady. "I'm still hurt, and it's going to take time for me to rebuild that trust." "I understand," she said, nodding earnestly. "And I don't want you to feel pressured. I just want you to know that I'm committed to working on myself and our relationship, but I'll respect your pace. I want us to figure this out together, but I won't push you." Her honesty struck a chord with me. I saw the determination in her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. But I also knew that this was not just about her commitment. It was about my own journey and what I truly wanted. "I think I need to focus on my own healing first," I finally said, my heart racing. "I want to be open to the possibility of rebuilding our relationship, but I can't do that until I've processed everything." She looked hurt but understanding. "I get it, Jake. I'll give you the space you need. Just know that I'm here when you're ready." As we parted ways, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. This was the first step in a long journey, and I was finally ready to navigate the complexities of my emotions. I was reclaiming my life, not just in my career but also in my heart. The road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but I was prepared to face it head-on. I was no longer just a man betrayed. I was a man on a mission to build a future defined by my own choices, free from the shadows of the past. What lay ahead was still uncertain, but I knew it would be a journey of growth, healing, and ultimately, a path toward the life I truly desired. In the weeks that followed, I dedicated myself to healing and self-discovery. I immersed myself in work while also attending therapy regularly. Each session became a sanctuary where I could unravel my thoughts and feelings about betrayal, forgiveness, and rebuilding trust. My therapist encouraged me to dig deeper, to explore not just the hurt, but also what I needed from my future relationships. During this time, Emily was respectful of my space. We exchanged texts and had the occasional casual conversation, but the intensity of our relationship had faded into the background. I appreciated her understanding and felt a sense of gratitude for her willingness to give me the time I needed. But I also knew that I had to be cautious. I couldn't let old patterns of behavior pull me back into a cycle of hurt. One afternoon, as I was sitting at my favorite cafe going over client reports, I overheard two women at a nearby table discussing their relationships. I realized that I can't change what happened, but I can decide how I move forward. One of them said, her voice dripping with sincerity. It struck me how powerful that sentiment was. I felt a spark of clarity, the understanding that while I couldn't change the past, I had the power to shape my future. That evening I met Emily for coffee again. It felt different this time. There was an air of mutual respect between us. As we sat across from each other, I sensed a shift in our dynamic. Instead of tension, there was a tentative hope. "Jake, I wanted to thank you for allowing me to give you space," she began, her voice steady. "I've been doing a lot of soul searching, and part of me wonders if we could work toward a healthier relationship, but I want to know what you want." I appreciated her directness. "I think we have to be honest with each other. I've realized that while I still care about you, I need to prioritize my own healing first before making any decisions about us." "I understand," she replied, her eyes reflecting a mix of sadness and understanding. "But I want to be here for you during this process. I'm committed to growing, not just for myself but for us too." Her words resonated with me. I felt a flicker of the connection we once shared, but it was tempered by a newfound maturity. "Emily, I don't want to rush anything. I think it's important that we both continue to work on ourselves individually. If we can do that, maybe we can explore the option of reconnecting down the line." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That sounds fair. I'm willing to put in the work and I'll support you in yours. Let's take it slow." As we talked, I realized that while the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, I wasn't the same person I had been before. I had grown from the pain, and I was no longer defined by Emily's betrayal. I was beginning to understand that healing is not linear. It's a winding path that requires patience, self-compassion, and time. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected call from my boss, inviting me to lead a new project that would expand our company's reach into international markets. It felt like the culmination of everything I had worked for, and I accepted the opportunity with enthusiasm. I relished the idea of taking the lead and was eager to make a mark on the industry. Emily sent me a congratulatory text, and I couldn't help but share my excitement with her. We began to communicate more frequently, sharing small victories and supporting one another as we navigated our respective journeys. I found myself appreciating her presence in my life, but I remained cautious, understanding that healing takes time. As I embarked on my new project, I noticed the enthusiasm with which I approached each challenge. I was no longer the deflated man who had been betrayed. I was a man who had risen from the ashes, ready to embrace the possibilities ahead. I also saw the subtle yet powerful ways in which Emily was working on herself. She was attending workshops, engaging in self-care, and becoming more involved in the community. It was inspiring to witness her transformation, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that we were both on the right path. Months later, I found myself at a crossroads. Emily and I had both made significant progress, and while we were still not officially back together, it felt as if we were building a new foundation. One afternoon, after a long day at work, I invited her to join me for a walk in the park. As we strolled through the vibrant foliage, I turned to her, my heart racing. "Emily, I've spent a lot of time thinking about us. I want you to know that I see the changes you've made, and it means a lot to me, but I also want to be honest about how I feel." She looked at me, her expression steady. "I'm ready to hear it, Jake. I think we've both grown, and I believe there's potential for us to reconnect," I said, feeling the weight of my words. "But I want to take it slow, and I want to ensure that we're doing this for the right reasons." Emily smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across her face. "I agree. I don't want to rush anything either. Let's take it one step at a time." That conversation marked a significant turn in our relationship. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter built on mutual respect, understanding, and a commitment to personal growth. While I couldn't predict what the future held, I felt a surge of hope that we could create something beautiful. Together, I had learned the importance of prioritizing my own healing and discovered that vulnerability and honesty were critical in rebuilding a foundation. I was no longer simply a man betrayed. I was a man who had faced the storm, weathered it, and emerged stronger on the other side. As we walked hand in hand, I realized that while the past would always be a part of our story, it no longer defined us. Instead, it had become a catalyst for growth, transformation, and a path toward a promising future, together or apart. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I was in control of my own narrative. This was my journey, and I was determined to make it a remarkable one.